What's going on, everybody? This is Benjamin Choy bringing you another F1 2020 video. Today going to be doing a kind of tutorial video on how I learned how to drive without the racing line. So for you guys that aren't really too familiar with it, the racing line assist is really just a general way to get around the track safely and efficiently, and it's not really the fastest way around the track. So even though the racing line is red, it doesn't necessarily mean that right where the red begins is the best place to hit the brakes. So I'm just gonna kind of show you what I've learned and what I've done to help myself learn to drive without the racing line. If you are brand spanking new to the game, which would probably be kind of rare, as the game is pretty much at the end of its lifespan right now, I would suggest just learning how to drive without any assists right away. You're going to be jumping into the deep end, but I think in the long run it'll help you out way more starting without any of the assists. For the rest of you who kind of use the racing line as a crutch like I do, and have been using it for a while now, hopefully this will either help you start learning or improve your learning process. But we'll get started right away to our first point, and that will be just pretty much using track furniture or signs on the track, anything that will help you locate braking zones. And we're going to start here at Albert Park. First couple of corners are pretty basic. Turn 1 really doesn't have any good brake markers. You'll kind of have to use muscle memory to figure that one out. But for others that do have usable brake markers, like this right-hand turn coming up right here, as you can see on the left-hand side of the track on the grass, there's a break in the wall there with an exit sign up top. Again, the racing line isn't the quickest way around the track, so you can usually brake a little bit later. I know the yellow starts right at the break in the wall, but you can use this kind of as a guide. During the race conditions, depending on fuel load, tire wear, and tire compound, you might brake a little bit later or a little bit earlier. But in general, this break in the wall right here is a good marker to, figure out where to start hitting your brakes. So we're going to move on to the next right-hand corner coming up here. And again, this is where the red starts, but we're going to skip a few frames ahead, and you can see on the left-hand side, again, there's another break in the wall with an exit sign and a red F. So, during the race, try to spot this, and just remember that it's the braking spot is a little bit before this break in the wall. After a little while, you'll probably get used to it, and you probably won't have to look for that marker every single time you're making that corner. But again, just in general, that break in the wall right there is a good brake marker for that right-hand turn. The rest of the corners in Australia have pretty visible brake markers. Some of them don't have any at all, and again, you're just gonna have to rely on practice and repetitions and get that muscle memory working for you. So we're gonna jump into Mexico right now. Pretty visible brake markers here at Mexico, so I'll show you what I use, and then you can kind of implement that into your own practice and training regimen. So we're gonna go right into turn 1. I'm pretty sure this is turn 1. I don't think there are any kinks or anything on the straight. Turn 1, the yellow starts, the red starts right before the 100-meter board. But again, you can usually brake a little bit later, but the 100-meter board is generally what I use as a marker to help me figure out where to hit the brakes. So you see the 100-meter board, hard on the brakes, shift down quickly to 4th, maybe pause a little bit between 4th and 3rd, and then right as you're hitting the apex, shift down into 3rd. The couple corners after this they don't really have any good markers, so again, you're just gonna have to do a lot of repetitions and get some muscle memory to figure out where to turn in without the racing line. So coming up to this corner up here, it's pretty much the same as the first couple of corners. The red starts right at the 100-meter board, and then the next couple sections of this corner complex here really doesn't have any good markers on track to really help you out. So you're just going to have to do a lot of practice and try to memorize really where to turn in. So on this left-hand turn right here, as you can see above my rear view mirror, there is a Petronas sign right where the yellow and red starts. So, if the braking spot isn't exactly at a distance board. You can see there is a 50-meter board off in the distance, but I find that the Petronas sign above is a better marker for me. So for this corner, really just a quick tap on the brake and then turn in. In a race, you would probably downshift to 5th to get better rotation, but in time trial, you're going a little bit faster. You have a little bit more downforce on the car. You can stay in 6th and take this left-hand turn really without too much of an issue. But for this corner, I used the Petronas sign. Right before this, there's also a little black box hanging pretty much at the same height as the Petronas sign there. You can also use that, but I prefer the Petronas sign as the black box. Kind of sometimes I cut the corner if I hit the brakes there and turn in a little bit too early. Now you may notice that the red starts closer to the 50-meter board there, but again, the racing line isn't the most efficient way around the track. You want to go out wide there to kind of flatten that corner as much as possible. So you're hitting the brakes and turning in a little bit before the line turns red there. So in that instance, even though the red starts right at the 50-meter board, I find that it's better to hit the brakes and turn in before the where the racing line suggests, and that's why I use the Petronas sign in that instance. So once you get comfortable and kind of have a braking marker for every corner on a certain track, I would suggest staying in time trial just so that you don't have any AI cars getting in the way or distracting you or anything like that. I would say, do 1 or 2 good runs with the racing line on just so you kind of have those braking spots memorized in your head. Then I would try 1 lap without the racing line and see how well you do. Turn the racing line back on, 1 or 2 more laps, and then turn it off for another lap, and then just work your way up. Try to get to doing 2 laps without the racing line and get it done somewhat cleanly. And then once you're comfortable with that, work your way up to 3 or 4 laps. And I think once you get to 5 or 6 laps without the racing line, where you're hitting pretty decent times. I'm not expecting anybody to go really fast in the first week of practicing without the racing line or anything like that. But once you're comfortable enough with 5 or 6 laps, then I would suggest going into Grand Prix mode and testing it out against the AI. And here your goal really isn't to beat the AI right away or anything like that. I would find a difficulty where you're able to stick close enough to the Hamilton or Verstappen AI, whichever AI happens to be quickest at whatever track you're practicing at. Make sure that you're able to keep up with them. I would suggest maybe where you can stay within their DRS, but don't set the difficulty so low that you're easily overtaking them right away. So again, the goal here really is to stick with the AI. Keep an eye on where they're braking, where they're turning in. Try to match them while using your braking markers as references, and kind of just improving your time and consistency a little bit. So here you see I get a pretty good start, and I get right behind Verstappen, get out in front of Leclerc hopefully. Try on the overtake and rich fuel mix. You got to remember also the first 2 laps the AI likes to use a lot of fuel and ERS to try and get out in front. So if you're not able to keep up with them right away in the first 2 laps or so, don't worry. Just as long as you can still see them, you'll generally be able to catch up with them if you're at the correct difficulty. So really what you want to do is what I'm doing on screen right now. Just pretty much keep up with them. Use your braking markers, adjust as needed. Again, like I said before, depending on tire wear, fuel load, and tire compound, you might have to brake a little bit earlier or a little bit later. But this is the best way to practice in my book anyway. You'll get a better idea of where you need to brake depending on the conditions of your car and the conditions of the track. And you can also use the AI cars as reference. And then once you get to the point where you're easily able to keep up with them and maybe even overtaking them, once you find that the difficulty that you're on is a little too easy, Instead of overtaking them at lap 10, now you're overtaking them at lap 5, and they can't keep up with you. Then I would suggest bumping the difficulty up 1 or 2 and see how well you can do at that difficulty, and then, bump the difficulty up as necessary by that point. I also want to take some time to mention another aspect of practicing with this process, and that is getting used to knowing how much pressure you really need to be applying through every single corner on the track. So knowing when to start braking is great and all, but you also need to get comfortable with what the brakes should feel like underneath your foot as you're going through the corner. So obviously, corners that you need to be trail braking through, you want to take the time to get comfortable with how much you should be braking and how long you should be braking through each turn. And I think that's just as important as knowing when to start braking. Obviously, if you're braking too hard or not braking hard enough, you're either going to come to a complete stop or shoot off the track and go wide and lose time. So, take the time to know, to learn the brake markers and where you need to be braking and turning in, but also how you should be handling the brakes as you're going through the corner and onto the apex and to the exit of the corner. I feel like people that are doing videos on how to drive without the racing line kind of gloss over that part a little bit, and I think that's just as important as knowing where to brake on track. But now that we've gone through that, I think that's pretty much it for my process. I think a benefit of this, of learning how to drive without the racing line, is that you'll probably unlock faster lap times. And case in point is one of the sections in Mexico. So we'll just hop right back onto the Mexico track, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. And the section of track that I'm talking about is going to be the S's, right after the left-hand turn under the Petronas sign. So you'll see once we get there that there's a section of the racing line right at the end of the S's that actually turns red. And I think when most people who are using the racing line, when they see red, they assume that they need to hit the brakes. But for that section specifically, if you take a good enough racing line, you really don't need to hit the brakes there. This goes for the S's at Suzuka as well. A slight lift at Suzuka can help you get through the S's, and you don't really need to hit the brakes. I feel like too many people lose too much time there because they're following the racing line too directly. But here, you can get through with either a small lift, or if your line is good enough, you can go in flat out. So just take a look at the throttle and brake trace at the bottom right hand part of your screen. I do a slight lift, but as you can see, there was no tap on the brakes there, and I think that's where the racing line slows down a lot of people. I've been noticing this at races, in online races at certain tracks, specifically Mexico and Suzuka, where I either do a slight lift or I'm going flat out through sections and I'm behind somebody. All of a sudden they hit the brakes and come to a complete stop, and I go to the back end of their car and lose my front wing. And I think it's because of situations like that where people are following the racing line too closely and hit the brakes every time they see yellow, orange, or red on the racing line, and they really don't need to. So in a case like this at Mexico, where you can hit that S section flat out, that makes a good case for why you should probably try to learn how to drive without the racing line. There are so many other sections of so many other tracks where the racing line kind of lets you down and makes you lose way too much time. And I think that if there's any reason to learn how to drive with the racing line, that's a good enough reason. It'll only make you faster, and also I think it'll make you a better intuitive driver. When I was using the racing line and I would make a mistake, I would try to automatically correct to get back onto the racing line, whereas when I'm not using the racing line, if I make a mistake, I just try to correct to where I'm losing the least amount of time possible, even if that means not getting back on to the game suggested racing line. And I think that makes you instinctively and intuitively a much better driver, because you're responding more naturally to a race, as opposed to responding to the colors on a line on the track. But anyways, that's pretty much it for me. I won't ramble on too long because it takes forever to render these videos, so I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But thank you guys for checking this video out. I apologize for not having put up anything lately for the last couple of weeks, but I don't have a good excuse. I was just pretty much lazy, and the weekly events have been absolute crap. Codemasters really needs to step that up. But thank you guys for coming back to check this out. I sincerely hope this helps some of you guys out, as this process has helped me out, learning a lot of tracks recently without the racing line, which I think has helped me become a little bit faster anyway. But yeah, again, thanks for coming back to watch this video. Stay tuned for more. Remember to eat your bok choy, and if you think I deserved it, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully it won't be another month-long wait for a video like it was between this and the last video. I should be putting out some more Road to 110 episodes in the near future, so stick around.